All
All
right,
right. All right.
sir. Thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate it. And we're here to discuss your latest publication. Can't even really call it a book because it's a very unique style of publication. The Wisdom Scrolls,
Yeah.
Past Lives. And but this is by no means your first rodeo. You've published plenty of material before. You've spoken about material before. So to start out, can you give us a background on how you got into esotericism, or however you frame your spiritual quest?
Oh, oh, sure. Well, I started out as a journalist. I worked in radio and newspaper, magazine. Then I started working in book publishing, and it happened so subtly I didn't really notice the change. But along the way, odd things began to happen to me. I mean, if I were honest, I'd remember as a child that I had like time slips,
Hmm.
and that I had times that I couldn't account for. I would have miraculous, like here I am somewhere, and there now I'm somewhere else, and 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 I have memories of living somewhere quite different from here. And as a child, I don't know if I have what Plato called a priori knowledge, but I seem to remember an earlier life, a past life. Um, and and um, and along the way, I seem to be getting a little bit of help, and I don't know where exactly it came from. I mean, sometimes somebody comes out and says, "I'm going to help you," like
Mhm.
Lewis Gittner on Orcas Island, people like that, or like my friend Karen, who said, I'm going to show you the magic. Look in the mirror. Are you looking? Are you looking? Or Lewis, who said, Are you listening? Are you listening? Because it is all around you. It is all around you. And it's so subtle that people will miss it. It just, if you're not looking closely, you'll miss it.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, I remember working for the newspaper years ago, and I went out in the morning and I was ready to go in my office, and I looked down where the newspaper usually was in the morning, and in place of the newspaper was a book with the cover ripped off. And I picked it up and I looked at it and I thought, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen. It was called A Call to the Heights, and it was written by Geoffrey Hodgson, a minister in New Zealand who turned out to be a theosophist. And he was a very gifted person. I mean, he could see auras, and he knew about chakras and the seven rays, and phenomenal person. I wish I could have met him. I've talked to people who actually studied with him. He was quite remarkable, apparently.
Hmm.
And I had this book. It was just left there with the cover ripped off, where my newspaper was. No newspaper, just the coverless book. And I had all these kind of experiences happening. Once I was on a plane, and I was supposed to be traveling with my book publisher from Portland, Oregon to New York City. We were doing a joint venture with one of the magazines out there, and and a flight attendant walked up to me, and she said, "I'm changing your diet immediately. You are now on a fruit and vegetarian diet." She said,
Huh.
"I will come back and talk to you after the plane is underway." She sat with me and she said, "Now, when you get to Minneapolis, I want you to call me and we'll start your yoga training."
Are you kidding? That's
No, no. And
serious.
I said, lady, that's really sweet. And I thought, she's way too cute to be picking up on me. This isn't happening. She's way too cute for me. Well, this is not what I think it is. She said, no, I'm quite serious. She said, when you get there, she said, now here's my card. And it had her name and it said the airlines. And I said, okay, you work for the airline. She said, well, turn it over. And it had a different name, a different name. I swear to you. And it said yoga training, just a phone number. And I said, well, what's this? She said, now when you get there, you call me and we'll begin the training. I said, well, uh, it is true this plane is going to stop in Minneapolis, which is where she lived. But I don't live in Minneapolis, and I have no plans to move to Minneapolis. I said, I'm just going from Portland, Oregon to New York, and we're going to stop there, pick up passengers, and continue on. She said, okay, okay. But when you do get to Minneapolis, you will call me, promise. I said, sure, sure I will. So, okay, so like 3 months later, when my boss suddenly decides the company has to be moved from Portland to Minneapolis, he said, I want to see the hands of those that are moving. Everyone else loses their job because we
Wow.
are moving this company. And I said, you know what? I like this company. I raised my hand. And then when I got there, and after I unloaded all my boxes in Minneapolis, I thought, oh my gosh. And I looked at the card and I called her. And I said, this is, you don't remember me, but I met you on a plane. My name is Von Braschler. She said, oh, good, you're here now. I'm not,
Wow. That's
I'm not kidding
incredible.
you. And she said, are you ready to start the training in yoga? I said, well, I said, are these personal classes or group classes? She said, you decide. I said, are they in the evenings or in the mornings or the afternoons or weekends? She said, I don't care. You decide. I said, am I going to pay you or are you just doing this? She said, Vaughn, I don't care. You tell me what you want to do and we'll do it. Well, this lady trained me and she was good. And after she trained me, she took me to a meeting in Minneapolis, and it turned out to be a theosophical meeting, just
Hmm.
like the guy that wrote the book, Jeffrey Hodson. And she said,
Did she ever say what it was that made her?
"No, no. In fact, I never saw her. She was always home, and I never saw. I never noticed a day when she was actually in flight. Right?
That's
Never,
amazing.
never, never. And in fact, one day she said, I'm going to be moving now to start a yoga school in New Mexico. This is the flight attendant. It's like, okay. And she said, okay. And I said, well, she said, but one thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to take you to your new group. She took me to a meeting of the Theosophical Society in Minneapolis. And she said, these are your people now. You stay with them. I said, okay.
That's
It's
amazing.
it's been quite a ride. It's been quite a ride. So, I mean, I started to put together all the little connecting dots because nobody trained me to be anything except maybe a itinerant journalist all my life. And all these things just kept coming to me, odd things. I would have lucid dreams at a young age. And I said, wait a minute. I think that I should seriously study yoga. So I have. And I think that it's made a huge difference in my life. I think I begin to understand things a little better. I've been greatly influenced by, in particular, one of the classics in Hindu literature called the uh, the uh, the uh, the sutras, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, because it's a book about consciousness, and it shows you in various exercises, which they call sutras, various exercises, how to visualize something that is not there until it becomes there. In other words, manifest.
Hmm.
And it shows you how to visualize something that's there and dissolve it. That is to say, relocate it. And I've learned that. I've learned that. It hasn't been easy. And I don't claim to be good, but I believe I have enough of a foundation that I've decided to write about it. So everything I write about, Jeff, is about consciousness, consciousness development, and how consciousness shapes our reality, how
Hmm.
everything from how we routinely view time space, how we routinely view the alternate reality, how we manifest, how energy becomes matter and matter becomes energy, our whole life destiny, and how we're shaping our destiny, and in fact shaping our reality in the world that we live in through consciousness. And people don't realize every one of us has this ability. Every one of us is engineered with this ability to shape our own reality through our consciousness. We all have um, energized thoughts that we send, and these thoughts, if they have enough intent and desire behind them, and they're focused enough and concentrated enough, can shape reality. And this is how everything takes form. Everything starts with energy and becomes form. So you say like, well, this is just the way things are. No, this is the way they were shaped by somebody's conscious thoughts. Our thoughts have power. So one of the first books I read as a theosophist was a little teeny booklet by Krishnamurti, who as a boy wrote under the pseudonym Alchanon, Alsanon. And he wrote a book called At the Feet of the Master. It is a book about right living and leading your life, and that everyone is on a life mission or a life journey. And it's a journey of discovery and insight. And also, it's going to take you home. Now, you determine what home is. It might not be Ithaca, like Odysseus. It might not be Oz or Kansas, like Dorothy. But every one of us is here for a reason. I mean, there are really only two questions we should ask ourselves every day we get up. Who am I and why am I here? Because this is why you're here. It's not just here to fry eggs and make coffee as I do every morning. There is a little bit more to it, you know. And if you're not on the journey of life and making progress in your life journey, then you're missing the point. you
Hmm.
know um, I think this is extremely important. So I've been trying to teach people how to control their dreams and lucid dreaming, because I think we can learn in our dreams. I've tried to help people learn how to meditate so they can actually focus their conscious thoughts. I've tried to work with people who um, in the area of like astral projection or remote viewing, which I think is extremely important. Everybody thinks the remote viewing is so special, that only special people can do remote viewing. Every one of us should be practicing it,
Hmm.
because every one of us has this ability, and every one of us. It says in 36 places that I found in the standard Christian Bible, and I don't want to speak religion here,
Hmm.
but it says essentially, you have eyes yet you see not. The point is, we need to learn to see with new eyes. These are our physical eyes. Now, where are the eyes of awareness? The eyes of awareness are when you're dreaming
Hmm.
and when you're remote viewing and you're astral projecting, or as they do in the East, they have the mystics of the Sumati tradition, or in the West, we have the shamanic tradition of the dream walkers, that they actually leave and they actually go somewhere, and they visit somewhere, and they see things while they're quietly seated and resting. So people often ask me when I write about time shifts and time slips and time travel, well, I mean, how do you physically go there? It's like, people, you have one physical body, and this is the body you walk through this physical life with. But you have a consciousness that is absolutely free to roam. Your consciousness is not bound by your physical body. It is not governed by the laws of physics. It is not earthbound. Your consciousness can leave your body and go anywhere.
Hmm.
There was a associate of Gurdjieff called P.D. Ouspensky.
I know Ouspensky well.
Oh my gosh, what an amazing, amazing man.
Absolutely.
And he writes about how we're all boxed in. We're all living this world where there are walls and we can't see outside the walls. And he said, well, that's because we're two-dimensional, or I think he said three-dimensional creatures. I would say we're two-dimensional creatures. We've only kind of like um, theorize the third dimension. There's no third dimension in our world.
Hmm.
But anyway, a world of limited dimensions, limited also by our five physical senses. Now, Ouspensky said to see outside of the walls. He talks about being in there, and you can't see or hear or understand the people who live above you or the creatures that live below you, Or what's outside the walls here inside this box? Well, we're all boxed in. This is the way we live. And this is because of our limited dimensions and our limited five senses. But Ouspensky said we're not limited if our consciousness can take us outside those walls.
Hmm.
And this is what meditation does. This is what lucid dreaming does. This is what remote viewing does, and astral projection. All of these things are extremely important.
And so one question that always occurs to me is why do we have to work so hard to retrieve the memories? Because one of the things that's mentioned in the scrolls is that
Yeah,
we remember our past lives. They come through in dreams. Sometimes they just come through in flashes throughout our
yeah,
day. Why though? Like, why is it so hard to access them?
yeah. Because it's like you speak German, but the dream was in French, right? Okay, so it's like you have to like absorb it, or as I say, internalize it. So when you come back, it's really important to just allow yourself this quiet meditation time when you just absorb um, within you, not intellectually, not your analytical mind, your brain, but absorb within you on a spirit level, deep within you. Let your conscious inner self absorb the message and become the message, and it becomes part of you. We try to analyze everything, and in trying to analyze everything, it has to conform to um, our preconceived parameters, which are based on what we've stored in our mind, these beautiful mental computers we have, and it has to conform to this what this prearranged set of information or cultural understanding. So, and it doesn't conform because outside in the dream world, or outside in the dream world, which could be quite exotic, which could be otherworldly, which could be other dimensions, it could be other universes, other realities. It could be so different that when you return, there's no point of reference. There's no frame of reference for you. So it's quite impossible for your brain, who wasn't even present at the time, your consciousness was present. It's quite impossible for your analytical brain, even if handed off the information upon re-entry from the dream,
Hmm.
to analyze it because it has no frame of reference, nor do you have any cultural frame of reference. So it's like, well, what people often do is they come back from a very lucid dream and they say, wow, that seemed so real and so important and so, you know, impactful to me. And yet I can't I can't really make anything of it because it just doesn't make sense to me. So I'll just shake it off and say, wow, that was something. Well, it was really something that you were meant to have. It was meant to be meaningful to you on a very personal level. So people say, oh, I'm going to get a dream interpreter. Someone's going to work with me and tell me what my dreams mean. I dream of a bear, and what does the bear mean? Or I'm floating through the sky, and what does this mean? Well, it only means something to you because these dreams that you're having are very personal um, experiences that have been set up for you by your inner spirit as
Hmm.
your guide taking you somewhere.
Hmm.
And these beautiful moments of education, of insightfulness, are meant only for you, and it can only be interpreted and understood on any level by only by you, by no one else. Um, and so I think it's very important that you allow your inner consciousness to absorb this because what you saw, there are no real words maybe just to describe it, or everything you saw is so alien. It might be different colors or a different landscape or a whole different life,
Hmm.
that you just can't make a whole lot of sense. And only then, after you've completely absorbed it on an inner level. So I always say, allow yourself some time to quietly reflect without an analysis. Allow yourself to absorb, maybe is a better word, absorb the 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 message and events of the dream that you've had. And only then, when you feel that you've absorbed it and relived it as best you can you stand up and then yes, you can write it in a dream diary, but only as an outline. Don't try to analyze it. You say, this is what I was dreaming. This is where I was. This is what I saw, and just a sketch outline. And then that's putting a pin in it. See, so it becomes a part of your analytical brain storage material, your memories. And so you have a consciousness. It's very important to establish, whether you're meditating or going into a lucid dream or any of this, you must establish a rapport, a harmonic rapport between your inner spirit, your consciousness, and your physical brain.
Hmm.
So that body, mind, and spirit are at harmony with the changing of the guard. This temporary, say, I am going to, for a few moments, allow my inner spirit, my inner consciousness, to take me and show me something. And it knows what. It knows what, because your inner spirit is the oldest part of you. It precedes your physical self. It knows why you're here. It knows the future. It will be here after your physical self is gone.
Hmm.
It is who you are. This shell we're walking around with now, our bodies, are no more than like a shell that a hermit crab would find on the beach.
Hmm. That's a funny metaphor because I was just at the beach and my friend bought some hermit crabs.
And when it's time to move on to another shell, they don't mind. They just go. But people
Right.
hang on to their physical bodies like this is it. Folks, this isn't it. You can make another one.
Hmm.
You made this one. Everything that's around you has been made by somebody's thoughts. Maybe not yours, but somebody's.
Hmm. And what do you think? What is the end game? Like, why do the conscious? Why do we keep coming back and relive and going through lives? Like, is there an end game to this? Like some goal that we're working towards?
Well, I thought a lot about that, and I keep coming back to the what in classical literature and psychology they talk about the arc of the hero's journey.
Hmm.
I think that it is an endless merry-go-round. That you get on the merry-go-round and you ride and you ride and you ride, and then you get off and you think about the experience of what you rode and the horse you rode in on, and
Hmm.
what you felt during that experience and what it was like around you. And then you get right back on the horse and go again, because
Hmm.
I don't think it ever ends. I think it is life without end, you know, and I don't think there is any end game, except that I think that in the grander scheme of things, I suspect that consciousness on a cosmic level, a universal consciousness, um, has allowed us to come here, has gifted us this moment, and allowed us to proceed again and come back here. And I can only guess that universal consciousness wants us to report on our experience
Hmm.
as physical beings. So I think that we're a part of a universal consciousness. We're all connected, and there's really only one soul in the universe, and we're part of that soul, and collectively we're gathering information, and this will go on forever and ever. Because life is always in a state of becoming something else, something new. You know, life is dynamic, filled with change, constant change. And people find this quite uncomfortable, but you know, it is the way things are. Things are always changing and evolving. You know, we're evolving. You know, we get so hung up on I don't want change. You know, and all of growth is painful, but all of growth is change, and it's the process of becoming something new. And I think we have to acknowledge that we're part of that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting stuff. And so when we come back for the each incarnation, or I guess maybe I should phrase it a different way. When we're not in this physical incarnation and we're like out there,
Yeah,
do we have like because I know we talk about the false ego, right? The ego that we
yeah,
develop through life.
right, right.
There has to be some kind of traits and like preferences and some kind of core identity that weaves through it all, right? Or are we like completely different people each incarnation?
I don't think we are. You know, I mean, I was very lucky when I worked at Llewellyn for about 10 years that I worked with the psychologist author Michael Newton, and who wrote A Journey of Souls,
I read that book. I've read
Destiny
that
of
book.
Souls. Yeah, it was great. He came one day and he put this big manuscript on top of us, and he said, "These are case studies. I'm a retired psychologist, but these keep coming back to me. These people are so darn interesting, and there's a thread." There's a connecting thread to each one of them. He said, they remember when I take that, when I regress them back as far back as they'll go to a previous life and a life between lives. And he said, and what they remember is remarkably the same. And they seem to know each other. So, I mean, what he came up with, and he hasn't the only one commenting on this, but he did it so eloquently. He talked about how we come back as soul groups and we're part of a cluster group. I guess maybe around a dozen people, you know, and sometimes you'll run into these people from your soul group, and sometimes you won't. Sometimes you're all here in the same place, and sometimes you're not. And sometimes you'll run into somebody and you'll say, doggone, we called it the deja vu moment. I really do know you. I can't place it, but it's like, oh my gosh, it's like you're my brother or you're my sister, you know, or it's
Right.
like you could be my mother, you know, and it's like, you know, these are our souls that we go through incarnations with over and over again, and we come back in this little group of souls and we compare what we've learned to what we've experienced, and then we outline. We talk about karma, but we with this group we outline what we would like to experience and hopefully learn in our next incarnation,
Hmm.
and we kind of pick where we're going to go and what we're going to do, and you know, and there's some impact from the group, and sometimes you know our group leader you know shows up with us, and sometimes not. Sometimes people that we've known lifetime after lifetime will show up with us and they're part of our group. And I think that's how we go through life, you know, with little family groups like this.
Hmm. There's some traditions and some thinkers that, have posited the idea that you can attain a kind of a state of enlightenment where you can just get out of this merry-go-round, where you can just get
Yeah.
out of the cycle. Do you
Yeah.
do you think there's any validity to that?
Well, the Buddha, you know, he talked about how you could reach instant enlightenment, you know, I don't, yeah. So apparently the idea would be that if you understood the process, the game was over. You know, there was no more mystery, no more puzzle to be solved, no more reason for you to be here. You know, your work, your life here would be ended. You know, so in that sense, then I conclude that there are no enlightened people on the earth, and I'll never meet any of them because therefore they wouldn't be here.
Right, right.
Yeah, and I don't care how many seminars they went to and how many certifications and how many masters they studied with. They are not enlightened, or they would not be here by that admission. But I think that overall people like to come back.
Mm,
And I think that horses like to come back as horses, and dogs as dogs, and trees as trees, and people as
mm,
people. And I don't discount the idea for a moment of um, uh, um, trans movement into other species where you could actually be reincarnated into another life form. But I
mm,
think it's very comfortable for people. People get into a comfort level, and moreover, people get into not just the comfort of living a certain life in a certain way and in a certain place, but they also get personally invested in that life mission. That is something you can't let go. I know that when I leave this life, there are going to be books that I didn't get to write, and I'm for sure going to want to come back and do them.
mm.
And so I won't be coming back as a tree or a dolphin. As much as that sounds good to me, I'm going to come back to finish the job because doggone it, that's the way people are. We're driven, and there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with desire and being driven. That is part of the magic that makes us who we are, it gives us the intent of and the focus to make our thoughts manifest on the earth.
Yeah, I love that because when you talk about these, when I mean in general, when people talk about these topics, it can be real easy to get into that like kind of that Gnostic, like world denying, like body denying kind of like mentality. Like
Yeah,
this is all an illusion, it doesn't matter, and so it's kind of like a sin to embrace
yeah,
earth and to embrace life. And
yep,
so
yeah.
I appreciate a positive take on it because to me personally, I think this life, as painful and difficult as it can be, is also a beautiful place. And I mean, like we should be enjoying it and should be grateful for it.
Oh, I totally agree. In a sense, this is paradise, but this is just a paradise. It's not the only paradise. I always think back to the Bhagavad Gita. Now, there's different ways to read the Gita, but I always tend to come back to thinking like the Lord Krishna, his advisor, told Arjuna that you can't stand on the sidelines. War's a terrible thing. It's a terrible
Mm,
thing. He says, but you can't stand on the sidelines. You have to take a part. You have to make a decision. Life is all about decisions and choices. And just doing nothing is not living. I mean, I was very intrigued back in the 80s when I lived in Oregon with the Bhagwan Rajni Shri,
mm.
Osha, and I would make many trips out to Antelope, Oregon.
Oh, cool, cool.
And I met with him, and he was a very wise man. And I always thought of him as Santa Claus because he had this big beard and the stocking hats. And he said, and I said, I would like to wear the orange saffron robe. He smiled and he said, it does not matter what you wear or what you eat or where you live. It matters what's inside you and what you do. He said, do you understand? And I said, oh my gosh, you're the real deal. I almost cried on the spot.
Mm.
Because this person could just like take all the clothes off you and say, "Here are your clothes. What's your problem?" You know, and he completely unravel you. And yet he went renunciate. You see, he went renunciate to the point where terrible people, politically minded, greedy people in his organization took over and ruined it all.
Right.
And
I,
that
I
was
am vaguely I'm familiar with the story, the main details. Yeah.
it wasn't Osho. It wasn't him.
Right, right.
And of course they ran him out because he didn't pay taxes, but of course he was a religious organization. So let me tell you, it was political. But the downfall of that group, as amazing as it was, and what they accomplished out there in the middle of the desert, in the end an exercise of greed and political takeover of a man who said, "I'm renunciate. I'll let others lead my group." And not everybody is trustworthy.
Right.
So I mean, to simply stand to the side and say, well, I'm going to live in a cave. I'm remember the life of Brian. This man was, was trying to live in a hole or something. And he said, oh no, this is the first time I've spoken in years. You ruined it. But he was, completely shut off from the world. And what is the point of that? I mean,
Right.
we have to be a part of this world. You know, I know that there are masters in the Himalayan mountains, the brotherhood, the Shangri-La, whatever you want to say. And they've sometimes come out of hiding, and sometimes they've made statements, and sometimes they've been quoted. And one of the things they said in the Mahatma letters to AP Senate was, um, he says, if you can do nothing else, you feed these people. He said, because you're responsible for these people. I mean, we're responsible to each other. And this is so hard for people to understand, that they feel so isolated. It's just me, I'll let the whole world go hang. No, it is. We're being, you're being tested every day, and the scorekeeper is you. Don't kid yourself. In the end, you're going to have to look in the mirror and tally it up. How many times did you help? Um, we've got to feed the poor. We're all interrelated to everything. We're related to everything that lives here. We're not that different from every blade of grass and every weed and every tree and every rock and every deer and every little chipmunk that lives. I mean, we're all in this game together. And when the tree cries, I cry.
And so, getting back specifically to your work, and
Yeah.
that's very interesting stuff. It's specifically to the latest publication.
Well,
So to the viewers,
hmm.
it's the product comes in an actual scroll. It's like not a
Yeah,
book, it's an
yeah,
actual
yeah,
scroll.
yes, yes. And
Yeah.
it's beautiful pine, and they're hand assembled, and they were really expensive to produce. So we've only done two, and we will not. There actually are eight in the set. I have them on amulets and talismans. I have them on animal spirits. And I have them on all kinds of things. We have magical altars. We have uh, healing, energy healing. There's so many topics, but we've only done the two, and the reason is they were really expensive to produce. We had to find a print shop somewhere that would produce them and then hand assemble them. And so, I mean, I kid you not, if you get one now, and I think from time to time they go on sale on Amazon. If you get one now, it will be a collector's item because they will not be reprinted. There will
Mm.
be no more of them.
Hmm.
The others in the line and the series, the Ancient Wisdom series on amulets and talismans and nature spirits and all of this. Um, these are going to be produced as little books
Oh,
because we couldn't produce them again in this fashion. And
hmm.
in fact, we had a problem when we produced them because we had to produce them in China, of all places. It's the only place we could find. And they would hand assemble them. And they did a lovely job, but very expensive. And they would not allow us to talk about the Dalai Lama. And I was talking about,
Oh, really?
yeah, I talk in past lives, I talk about one of the sure ways you can be darn sure that there are past lives is the way they select the Dalai Lama in Tibet. And for like 7 times in a row, 14 times in a row, this is the 14th Dalai Lama, they would, after the Dalai Lama passed, the high lamas would go throughout all of Tibet and they would interview children to find out who knew intimate details of the previous Dalai Lama without ever having met him. See? So then they would find the reincarnation in that way of the Dalai Lama. And
Hmm.
they would find this. They would find somebody that knew everything about the, his favorite color and his best friends and what he liked to do in the afternoon. And they knew all that. And they would find, inevitably, they would find this. And it was, so, but they don't like talking about religion in China, you know, and they don't like talking about, I don't think Buddhists would necessarily call themselves a religion, but a philosophy. They don't like talking about spirituality in China.
Right.
It is somehow threatening to their political way of life.
Hmm.
So I had to take out the part where I describe selection of the next Dalai Lama. But I think
Wow.
everybody knows that story, and I vowed that every time I talk about that scroll, and I would describe what was omitted.
Hmm.
So
That that's
this is my edit, Jeff, right here.
nice, nice. Now everybody will know that it's at least supposed to be in there.
Yeah,
So oh, I had a thought and I just lost my train of thought. And so what we were talking about was the Dalai Lama. Oh, and so also in the scroll, you discussed the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the impact
yeah,
that it's having on our hospice care system.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Could you just
So
discuss that a little bit?
yeah, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there is a tradition in discussing the travel one goes through the Bardo system. That after you die, you have to find your way, through death from this world to the next, and it would be difficult. And I think anyone who's ever like worked with ghosts, as I have, know how confusing it is to people when they die. So I find this
Hmm.
totally believable, this understanding. But they talk about, that all the demons, and I'm not sure they literally mean demons, but they might mean figuratively, in the sense of like the hero's journey of discovery, the arc of the journey, and talk about like supernatural forces that prevent you from going on your journey. Well, the journey from life to death then would be something one must practice for. So one would practice for the moment of death. So we come now to, in the West, this understanding of conscious living, conscious dying. So that when you, in a lot of hospice programs now, they're beginning to talk about conscious living, conscious dying. And of course, the big payoff is that when you die, then you will be conscious conscious of the fact you're dying, and you consciously know where you're going to go. So it's not a shock that you die and you wake up and say like, where am I? Nobody can see me. I can see them, which would be sadly what happens to some people that we now call ghosts. They're wandering
Hmm.
around confused. So this confusion is resolved by conscious living, conscious dying. And I think this is a wonderful way that East and West have been able to merge into now what we call the hospice program.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting. I love it's easy when you think about like when we die that there's this kind of like instant transition from here to whatever the thing is that
Yeah,
we call death. And it's a really interesting idea that it's like it's us and we're just waking up into a different reality and we actually have to find our way around. That's
yeah,
um
yeah.
that's not usually how I think of it, and that's not usually how I
Well,
think most people think of it. So that's very fascinating to
I've
consider.
I've often considered since I did work in with ghosts for a while, how difficult it might be for somebody who suddenly died to recognize that they had died, and to recognize that they're not supposed to be here, and to recognize they need to go somewhere else, and
Hmm.
moreover, to willingly go, because they said, doggone it, no, I refuse to go.
Right.
So we have these spirits that hang on. And when I was trained to, as my teacher Helen said, de-ghost houses, She said, "You're going to come to houses, Vaughn, and there's going to be somebody there sitting there in a chair, and it'll be a ghost, and they'll be sitting there with their coat on, maybe a hat, maybe a handbag, or maybe they'll have certain things that they think they got to have, and they just don't know what to do next. They're just and they're very angry and they're very confused, and you got to sit there and reason with them."
Hmm.
What she didn't tell me was, it doesn't always happen like that either. It can
That's
be
amazing.
it can be really ragged for some people.
Hmm.
And that's really unfortunate. People need to recognize that what we're call life right now isn't really life. It's just a chapter. It's not the life. It is just like we're in a state of transition. I mean, every 30 days you're completely different. You get new blood, you get new cells. Everything about you is different. So the Krishnamurti once said, reincarnation is an untrue fact because the truth is you're a new person,
Hmm.
over and over and
Interesting.
over again. And you have the chance then to say, I'm a whole new man or a whole new woman, and I can turn my life around, because we just think that, oh, it's just always the same and it's always going to be like this linear idea we have of life, and it's really stagnant. It's really a dead end,
Hmm.
it's not healthy. We're in a state of transition from the moment we're born. And so we think of this as being life, but this is just a transitional state. And then we think of death as being so dark in the absence of life. I think, in fact, there is no such thing as life as we know it, and no such thing as death as we know it. It just keeps, it just like the leaves on the trees they keep recycling,
Hmm.
and it was perpetual. And it will never end. You're always going to get back on the carousel and ride a new horse.
Hmm. That's interesting. So, and also in the scrolls, there's some discussion about some of these techniques that you could use for the lucid dreaming and for
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Could you just obviously we were encouraging people to check out the work, so we don't want to share all
yeah,
these techniques, but could you give a
yeah.
general overview of them?
Yeah, I tried to explain that briefly because the scrolls are brief, right? The whole idea of the scroll was a quick hit, and it would introduce you to a topic in ancient wisdom tradition. So next year, I do have a whole new book coming out. I'm not going to plug it, but I just want to say that people do want to have the step by step by step, and so I'm going to do that. It's called Programming Lucid Dreams. But
Oh, wow.
briefly, it's this: that you have to put yourself completely at rest, physically and mentally. So by that I mean that you have to let your body go numb. Now you don't have to completely go to sleep. You could lie on the sofa, you could sit in a chair. Yes, you could meditate, but you need to get very still and let the body go numb. Let it go to sleep and will it to sleep, And I do this like I do the self-hypnosis technique. My feet are asleep, my legs are asleep,
Hmm.
my torso is asleep, and now my head is asleep, and finally my brain is asleep. And I say my physical brain will now freely go to rest for a while to allow my inner consciousness to come forward. And the other important thing to think of is pre-visualizing a an events calendar of what you want to do, a to-do list in your day. Where do you want to go in your dream? Every good journey, every good trip starts with an agenda. Where are you going to go? What do you want to learn? What do you want to see? So you sketch this out, not with words or sounds, because that's involving your analytical mind.
Hmm.
So this is going to be doomed from day one. It's going to be a trip in your head. And people say, "Oh, it's a trip in your head." Yeah, if you do it that way, it is. But what you want to do is allow your consciousness to help you formulate this general picture. You're drawing a picture a picture of where you want to go, what you want to see, what you want to learn, who's going to be there, and where it is, and even to the point of is it in what we call the here and now, or is it in the past? Is it in the future? Because in your lucid dream, you can go anywhere in space time, anywhere, in the past, in the future. There are no limitations of physics. You know, your conscious mind is not limited by the laws of the physical universe. You can go to the an alternate reality. You can go to an alternate a universe. You can go to a parallel world. You can go to another planet. You go to the moon. Sybil Leek used to talk about witches going to the moon all the time, and of course she was right. And of course they didn't need broomsticks because they could travel this way. You
Hmm.
see, they would travel this way, and so you draw a picture or you sketch a picture, and it doesn't have to be elaborate. It's just like the kind of sketch stick man thing you would do with a pen on a napkin, because it's your shorthand and only you have to read it, and it becomes then your map of where you're going to go.
Hmm.
And then you prepare yourself emotionally to allow you to follow this 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 agenda as a roadmap to where you want to go. And
Hmm.
then you prepare yourself psychologically for allowing your consciousness to leave the body and go there, wherever it is. And you will go there with unerring accuracy, just as we can send our thoughts through the air to a target with unerring accuracy if we have focus.
Hmm.
And you and but it's very, very important to one to put the physical body to rest. I like the dead man pose in yoga, but it could be anything. It could even be in a chair, and it could be in a daydream. It doesn't. You can do it eyes wide open, and you can also program this to when you first go to sleep. You say, give yourself a post-hypnotic suggestion that when I first doze off, then I'm going to bring back my agenda that I've created, I've drawn, and I'm going to bring it back. And when I fall asleep, then I allow my physical mind to shut down. My consciousness comes forward, and it brings with it my agenda, and that becomes a roadmap, and I follow it directly, and I leave my body and follow this roadmap, and it will. You don't need GPS. Believe me, believe me. Your consciousness knows where to find things.
Hmm.
It is really good. You don't need Santa's sleigh. You don't need GPS. You will get there. And what the good news is that you can have continuation dreams, and you can return to dreams in this way and really begin to explore things that interest you. And you don't always have to have such elaborate planning in drawing your agenda or sketching your agenda, because you should allow your inner spirit, your consciousness, to have a part, because it knows where you need to go and what you need to learn. It will be your guide. Your guide is your inner self. Your higher angel is your consciousness.
Hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic stuff. And we're at near the end of the hour. So the last
Uh-oh.
question, yeah, the last question I would like to ask. You're talking, say you're talking to a young seeker, somebody who's just feeling this call, just feeling this desire to explore this realm of spirituality. What would your advice to them be?
Listen and see with new eyes. Listen, listen, listen is what Lewis always told me. He said, listen, listen, listen. People don't listen. He said, when it's quiet, then you need to listen. And then when it's really quiet and you've turned out all the noise, then you can hear. And it's like there's a book you can there's actually a book. Yeah, it's written by Blavatsky called The Sound of Silence, Sound of the Silence. And once you really learn to quiet all the noise around you, one might call this meditation.
Hmm.
Um, then you begin to hear things that others don't hear. And the same is true of this other awareness skill. It's like learning to see with new eyes. You know, Carlos Castaneda wrote endlessly about the difference between seeing, um, you know, and he would put it in italics, you know, so you'd understand that there were different levels of seeing. But there are ways to see beyond the physical eyes, and most people haven't even considered this, you know. So there are uh, when one begins to follow the inner spirit consciousness as a guide, then the skills of awareness replace the five physical
Hmm.
perceptive skills, and one gets to hear better and see better, and in all ways perceive with greater awareness and and perceptive awareness is way superior. So it's my teacher Lewis said, I want to tell you there's three important things, Vaughn, that you must always, always, always remember. And I said, should I write them down? He said, I think you'll remember. He said, the first is listen, the second is listen, and the third is listen. But
Hmm.
then he didn't believe any of his students would remember this, so he wrote a book called Listen, Listen, Listen. You know, and it's like, yeah, exactly.